Okay, so where do you begin when developing the IEP? Typically, we review the current IEP and most recent evaluation before writing the new one. Reviewing the expiring IEP helps the team determine what was or was not successful and what changes to make for the new IEP. This information becomes the basis for the new IEP. When you review the previous IEP, ask for specific progress made towards the annual goals and specifics corresponding to each objective or benchmark. For example, if a goal or objective was written to be obtained with 75% accuracy, you should be able to find out from the review exactly what percentage of accuracy was obtained. Objectives and benchmarks are not always included in IEP goals. They are if your child is on an alternative assessment, and you would know that because it's documented in your IEP. After reviewing the previous IEP and recent evaluations, you have the baseline information in order to write the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. The new present level should reflect the progress that you have just reviewed, or in some cases, lack of progress. I think it's really important to note the title of this portion of the IEP. It's titled The Present Level of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. In previous reauthorizations of IDEA, it was called The Present Level of Educational Performance. And the reason that I like this new description is because it kind of gears the IEP team to think about the whole child. So it's not just academic achievement. We don't go to school just to learn reading and writing and math. We go to school to learn how to work with others, to learn how to follow directions, to learn how to navigate a building, and all of those things. So when you're looking at how the disability affects your child's progress in the general education curriculum, you also want to look at how your child functions in that environment. And those things need to be taken into consideration when you're developing the IEP. So there's many sections that come under the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. They include how the child's disability affects his or her involvement in the general education curriculum. Remember, this is the whole reason your child is on an IEP. IDEA was enacted in order to allow your child to progress in the general education curriculum. So this section of the present level really needs to describe why your child is on an IEP. It also includes the strengths of the child. The strengths of the child can include that they really love sports and they have a beautiful smile and they're friendly and they're outgoing. However, you really want to focus on those strengths that are going to allow your child to build on skills and progress in the general education curriculum. So if they have really good listening comprehension and they can answer things orally, if they're a really hard worker and they persevere through tasks even when they're frustrated, these are strengths that you can build on to help them progress in the general education curriculum. Concerns of the parent. This is the only section of the IEP where the parent has total control of what goes into the IEP. So I recommend that parents come prepared with a statement of their concerns. And not only of your concerns for the next school year or the 1 year that the IEP will be implemented, but also some midterm goals and some long-term goals. It's really important for parents to let IEP team members know the direction and the vision that you have for your child, because they may have a totally different vision. So for instance, in grade school, if a student is identified with an intellectual disability, IEP team members may assume that this student is only going to learn functional curriculum and not be competitively employed. Or if they are going to be employed, it may be at a sheltered workshop. If your vision for your child is to be competitively employed and live independently, you want to make sure that everybody on your team knows that that's the direction that you want to go in for your child. And again, progressing in the general education curriculum should allow your child to reach those potentials that they have. You also want to talk about mid-range goals. So again, going back to elementary school, when your child's in elementary school, the next transition that he or she may have would be middle school. What is that going to look like? What kind of skills is your child going to need to gain by that time in order to participate as much as possible in the general education curriculum and in that school environment? So you want to have short-term goals, what is the biggest priority issue for your child to work on right now during the next IEP, but also those mid-range and those long-term goals to give everybody a direction. The present level also includes any changes in current functioning since the prior IEP. Typically, the information included in this area is progress on goals. So the goals that your child was working on during the last IEP and the amount of progress that they made. It could also include any changes in behavior or programming or anything that may work best, that they found works best for your child, that they really do best with a hands-on approach, or any information like that. It includes a summary of the most recent evaluation results. And oftentimes when summaries are included, it gives general information such as an IQ score that was in the low average range and achievement testing that was in the low average range. That may not be sufficient information so that the IEP team can determine appropriate accommodations and supports and programming. And I'd like to give you an example of that. So cognitive testing, a very common cognitive test or IQ test is called the WISC-4. And the WISC-4 is made up of several components. And I'm just going to give you an example of my son. My son on the WISC-4 earned a full scale IQ of 109. And 109 is in the average range. 100 is dead average. So from about 90 to 110 is the average range. The WISC-4 is broken down into 4 components. There's the verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Okay, so verbal comprehension is your ability to learn and use language to learn. And my son's verbal comprehension score came out at about 119. So it's high average. But when you look at his perceptual reasoning came out at 127. And perceptual reasoning is the ability to learn not using language, so nonverbal intelligence. And that is in the high average to superior range. Working memory, his score came out at around 87. And working memory is your ability to take information in the short term and manipulate it. And then his processing speed came out at 72. And processing speed is how efficient or how quickly he can process that information and respond back. So 109 does not describe my son. What we learn from these scores is that he's pretty good with his verbal comprehension, but he's almost in the superior range with nonverbal learning, and that he's a little weak when it comes to keeping information in the short term and manipulating it. And then his processing speed, it takes him a very long time to process that information. 70 and below is considered in the deficient range, so he was really close to that. So looking at these scores, I would know that my son may need some visuals and some reminders when given instructions, or it may need to be repeated several times because he doesn't keep those in his working memory that easily. But it also tells me that he processes information slowly, and he would need extended time on homework, extended time on tests, and extended time to respond to questions when in the classroom. So that's the kind of information that you want to make sure that you gain from that summary of the most recent evaluation results. Not all of them need to be broken down, but when you have variances like this within those test scores, you want to make sure that that information is explained in the present level so that the team can determine the appropriate accommodations and programming for your child.